first major LAN post TI5 is almost upon us. ESL One New York happening October 3rd through 4th in Madison Square Garden Theater. There are 8 teams that are invited. Team Secret, VP, CDEC, and EG. Well, 4 invited teams, 4 qualified teams. The 4 qualified teams are on the bottom. SCA is Fnatic, EU is Vega, NA is Fire, and China is EHOME. And post TI5, we actually haven't seen too much cross-regional play. Sometimes you'll see like the Western scene lumped up in one qualifier, but for this, there's one for each region, as with a lot of many other tournaments. And the point of that is that we haven't actually seen a lot of these teams play against each other. Like usually you'll see like NA teams play against EU. I think last year they actually only had EU qualifiers or something like that, and if you want to participate from NA you had to actually go to the EU qualifiers. But this year is a little bit different, and we really don't have any clue on how some of these teams will fare. EG has not played a single official in 6.85 or post TI5, same with CDEC. So we pretty much just know that they were decently strong at TI5, but what has happened in that month and a half, almost 2 months, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. So firstly, you should be familiar with the bracket for ESL One New York. It is a single elimination best of 3 finals, usually best of 5. Sometimes with time constraints it is a best of 3, but you can rest assured that it will most likely be a best of 5. And the brackets have already been released. Each of the invited teams, the 4 direct invite teams, are paired up against a qualifier team. So Team Secret versus Fnatic, Fire versus CDEC, EHOME versus VP, and EG versus Vega Squadron. And these are all actually pretty close matchups. I would say Secret Fnatic, maybe 60-40. Again, it's very high variance. It could be 50-50, it could be 40-60, just because these two teams have not played each other. Fnatic hasn't even played that many matchups. They took down MVP to get to this event. So just based on the talent on the team as well as recent performance within their regions, I would say Secret slight favorite, 55-45, 60-40 maybe for them, but I'm not terribly sure about that one. Fire versus CDEC. CDEC, not a single game on 6.85, no official information on them, but they seem a lot stronger than Fire. Fire could be the strongest team from NA aside from EG, but it seems like Fire and Cloud9 seem to be pretty darn good. Digital Chaos can be kind of be lumped into them, same with a couple other teams. So that region is kind of a mess, but they're much more skilled than before. So generally, or maybe even last year, I'd be like, wow, Fire, just count them out the first round. They're not even going to put up a fight, and they really didn't last year. But this year, they can actually put up a decent fight. I would say maybe like similar odds, 40-60 in favor of CDEC, maybe 35-65 if CDEC play like they did at TI5. It's a new patch. They weren't very good at Leshrek, so I think that's actually a good thing for them come 6.85. And I think their playstyle actually will transition to 6.85 very well, because 6.85 wasn't that huge of a patch. So CDC still should be favorites. VP versus EHOME. EHOME surprised me a lot by advancing through the Chinese qualifiers. They had to beat LGD and IG. Oh, actually, I don't think they directly played LGD, but they beat IG and they beat VG Gaming to get to the Chinese qualifier finals, which was pretty darn surprising. They 3-1 IG and they 2-0'd VG Gaming, and VG was mostly the same roster. So that is really surprising. I didn't watch the games just because they were at like 3 or 4 a.m. my time, but Old Chicken apparently on there. He was from Energy Pacemaker. 11 is a new guy. CTY Lanham still there. ROTK out. And Kaka, I think he played for HGT, is in now as a support. So apparently they played very, very well. VP, there's a similar situation to Fire, where there's like a big blob of European teams that can each beat each other, but I would say that they're slightly better off than Fire. They did lose to Secret pretty recently, but VP, same roster as TI5, so they have that going for them. I will say this one probably slight EHOME favorite, but I don't know. You can pretty much just call it a coin flip. Vega Squadron versus Evil Geniuses. Vega qualified from the European qualifiers again have a pretty big blob, Vega, NIP, a couple other teams in that mix, and they have a pretty young roster, but they haven't ever delivered any big results on LAN to my knowledge, and EG is, I think, the big favorite going into this tournament. So this one I would probably say like 65-35 in favor of EG, maybe even 70-30, but I have no idea how often EG scrims. I don't know how well Arteezy has transitioned into the new team. I don't know whether Arteezy and Sumail are like changing out roles. Occasionally there is just such a big element of what's going on there that I'm not actually sure. Are they still going to be like Titans after winning TI5? We saw Newbie fall off quickly. It took them a few months. Maybe EG falls off sooner. Maybe with having Arteezy, they still have the same fire. They're my favorites going in, though. I would say going in, it's probably like 30%. They're going to take it all. I think it's a pretty good estimate, maybe even a little bit better, just because their matchup, I think, versus the weakest team of the 4 qualifiers. I would say even Fire probably is maybe even a more difficult matchup for CDEC. So that is my prediction for who's going to advance in the first round. And then in the finals, I would probably say EG versus Secret or CDEC. We might even see a TI5 final rematch, though. And that's kind of cool. And as far as your Vulcun picks go, the Vulcun brackets aren't actually out yet, but I would pick 3 from EG, certainly. And then probably 2 from either Fire or CDEC or Secret. And probably 3 from... Let's see, actually 3 from EG, 3 from Secret, and 2 from CDEC. Problem is, I don't know if I view CDEC as more favored in their matchup versus Fire than Secret versus Fnatic. I would actually probably do 3 EG, 3 CDC, 2 of either Secret or Fnatic, most likely Secret at that point. That seems probably the safest route to go as far as the teams that have a higher chance as to going to the finals. The reason I don't want to pick any of these is because I think this is a 50% matchup, and on top of that, next round they're very likely facing Evil Geniuses. Of course, like any other tournament and any major matchup that we see and teams haven't played yet, there's a very, very large amount of variance in this just because of the roster swaps, the recent patch that hit. This will be the first official LAN on 6.85, so take that with a grain of salt if you're really stingy, or if you're really concerned about your bankroll or your gold, then I would abstain. And if you want even more information, that Dota actually released something on September 24th. ESL One New York is upon us and did a little bit of analysis for each of these teams, so you can get another opinion aside from my own. That Dota very rarely actually does analysis for tournaments outside of DAC and TI. So this is kind of cool and unusual. And of course, if you haven't signed up yet, sign up at vulcun.com with promotional code Merlini Dota. I will be working the event. I will be casting a couple series and mostly on the analyst desk. So see you guys there, October 3rd through 4th, New York, Madison Square Garden Theater.